morning. Thank you for joining us. Everyone can hear me, correct? Taki, all good?
Yes, all good.
Very good. All right, so let's begin. Whole brain cognitive remapping approach through movement and music. How important is movement and music to the brain? We're going to talk about the brain today and how each of the jobs that the lobes, the 4 lobes of the brain, does, and how music and movement together can stimulate those areas of the brain that a lot of times need stimulation for our kids with autism. Okay, it's not going forward again. Saki?
Yeah, I'm just checking.
See if you can move it forward.
I just sent you a request.
There we go. Move. There we go. All righty. Here we go. Working with individuals on the autism spectrum, autism and the autism movement therapy. So autism disorders, what does it look like? Well, what we know is that it's a silent disability, as we call it. What about the communication skills? We always have a deficit in the communication area. Speech and language deficit in either speech or language or both. And either receiving language or speak it. We have behavioral issues. We have lining up of objects. We have insistence on sameness. We have tantruming. We have a lot of stimming. And we have a deficit, core deficit in the social skills area, which is the last session we did last Sunday was about social skills and building friendships and communication friendships between our kids with autism and neurotypical individuals. So autism is a neurological brain difference. I like to say difference instead of disability. It's just a difference in the way that our children think. It profoundly affects a person's ability to communicate, which is speech and language, form relationships, which is social skills, with others, and respond appropriately to the environment, which is behavioral. So all of those 3 deficits, core deficits, must be present in order to have an eligibility of autism. So we have communication, we have social skills, and we have a behavioral deficit. So what is autism movement therapy? Now, you know, it's a method that I developed, autism movement therapy, and I call it waking up the brain. And I came about developing the program from being in the classroom. I was in the classroom for 10 years at Los Angeles Unified School District, teaching students with autism, K to 2, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then I taught the older kids in what we call the CBI, or Community-Based Instruction Program. When I was in my 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classroom in 2000, I began to use movement and music every day in the classroom. I had music playing. I always had a CD playing in the front of the classroom, a CD with no lyrics. So I like to use music to stimulate the brain. There's either classical music or environmental music, but music without lyrics. Classical being Beethoven and Stravinsky, Ravel, Bach, very good because it's da-da-da-da-da, a lot of number, a lot of math. We want to use music and movement together, though. And I came upon that because I started offering yoga classes. My kids were doing yoga. They were listening to music if I was not lecturing, and they were working on task. All of a sudden, I realized, bingo, it's the movement and music together. My kids who were stimming and rolling on the floor and stimming on the ceiling, lights on the ceiling, were sitting in chairs, attending to tasks, and working on computers. And this was 20 years ago. And I said, as soon as I can, and I'm not teaching any longer, I'm going to develop a method, a movement and music method. I have a degree in dance, movement and music method for kids with autism. And that's how it came about. Individuals with autism have difficulty accessing and retrieving information in both the long, which is at the back of the brain, and the short-term memory, which is at the frontal lobe. We call that the executive functioning lobe. The good news is that scientists now know we can often jumpstart the impaired informational pathways, meaning stimulating those pathways through the cortical cortex and the corpus callosum, the left and right hemisphere of the brain. We can begin to get the left hemisphere, which is where the majority of the deficit is, in the left hemisphere of the brain. The speech and language lobes live, speech and language areas live in the left side of the brain. They live in the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe, and the Broca and the Wernicke's. And we're going to talk more extensively about them. This is the first article that I wrote, 2009, on autism movement therapy, and it was published in Autism Asperger's Digest, actually. I think you can still retrieve it online if you're interested. The Center for Disease Control in the United States, these are the facts for us in the US. Now, I don't know the facts for in India because I don't think we do have the facts, the stats for India. I know that they've begun to look at compiling individuals with autism and the numbers that we have, but I don't believe, but correct me if I'm wrong. There's a new case of autism diagnosed every 20 minutes in the United States. 1 in 54 children are on the autism spectrum. That's as of March of 2020. Estimated economic impact is over $90 billion a year in services and outside services and social skills. Behavior is paid for by our insurance companies. So that is no longer a parent, left to the parent to pay for. ABA is paid for. Only ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, is paid for by the insurance companies in the United States. The ratio is 6 to 1, 6 boys to 1 female. Lots of studies on that. What's that about? There's lots of studies on older males as fathers. There's a study out of Israel on older men. There are studies on environmental factors that affect testosterone in the in vitro of the baby. But we have no definitive, as we know. No definitive on what the cause of autism is. We're looking at 7 or 8 different mechanisms. We're looking at lots of different mechanisms for autism, and predisposed genetics is what we're looking at. The average cost is $60,000 out of pocket a year. It's the fastest growing developmental disability in the US, and there's no cure right now. We don't have a cure for autism. 1.5 million cases in the US, and that could reach 4 million in the next decade. It's not specific. Autism is not specific to race, socioeconomics, or parental educational levels. So that means autism can affect anyone. From 1998 to 2002, an additional 96% increase in autism in the state of California. Autism cases represent over 18% of California's regional center caseload. We have what we call regional centers here in California, where the state and federal money comes together to support our families. And they support they do an assessment for autism. They provide services, social skills services, speech and language services, and behavioral services. They set that up through the insurance companies. There's more than 171 million cases, and autism accounts for nearly 60% of the intake in these regional centers for disabilities. So the majority of intake for disabilities in the regional centers here in California is autism. Overall, there's a 273% increase in autism from 1987 through 1998. I put that in because at that time we were seeing thimerosal in the vaccines, which is a known neurotoxin. Since 2004, thimerosal was taken out in the United States in the vaccines. You might want to check and see in your vaccines if there is thimerosal. It's a known neurotoxin and it's a preservative. And the pharmaceutical companies put the thimerosal in the vaccine so that they can they can store the vaccine in 20 doses as opposed to a single dose vial. But in 2004, that all stopped here in the United States. That's no, you can read a great article in, if you want to read an article on that, in the Rolling Stone, interestingly enough, published this, and it's called Deadly Immunity. Deadly Immunity. Very, very good. Very good. One of the Kennedys, Robert Kennedy, wrote it. He's a big environmentalist. Common characteristics, as we know: echolalia, which is repetition, repeating the same thing over and over again because the individual doesn't have the capacity to communicate further. They repeat. So it really serves a purpose. It's a function and a form of communication. We don't want to stop echolalia. It has its own developmental processes that children with echolalia go through until that area of the brain, the left side of the brain, the Broca and the Wernicke's, do develop, and the child is able to have receptive and expressive language. So don't stop echolalia. It serves a purpose. It regulates. Typically, our children who have echolalia also, and you've seen, those of you who have done my autism certification workshop level 2, rock. They typically rock either left or right or forward and back as they use echolalia. It's a self-stimulation. It is a regulation. We see a lot of times individuals with autism have outbursts. It's very hard to not be able to communicate. We see the majority of outbursts and tantruming comes from our children who can't communicate. They can't communicate, they're misunderstood. Many times we talked about characteristics, needing sameness. Familiarity and rituals are very important to a lot of our little guys. Now, typically our kids grow out of that, but when they're little, they only want the red marbles here and the green marbles here and the blue marbles here and don't touch the black marble. Difficulty in understanding or comprehending everything that's going on in their environment. And why is that? Because they're having difficulty accessing what we call the variables in the environment in order to process the variables in the brain and have higher level thinking skills. So I'm not saying our children don't have higher level thinking skills, because they are capable of that. It is a miscommunication many times in sound, in visual, and in all the senses really. Tactile as well. We have issues with tactile that stem from the parietal lobe, and we're going to talk about the lobe, so I want to get to that. Difficulty communicating, difficulty turning a conversation, difficulty expressing themselves. And a lot of our kids have food allergies, as you know. And here in the States, we have a lot of gluten-free. We're taking the gluten out of a lot of our foods for our children, and dairy-free. So casein-free and gluten-free. And you'll want to talk to your doctor or your pediatrician if your child, if you feel that your child is a child that would benefit from having the gluten-free and casein-free diet, then talk to your doctor about that. And many of times the way we know that is a child will experience, who's not able to communicate, will experience pain after they've eaten. Their intestines, they're in their intestinal tract. So, you know, look for these kind of signs for food allergies, etc. Okay, so let's get into the brain. These are the side views of the lobe. So we have frontal lobe, which is right here at the top, right here in the front. It's the executive functioning. It's where our short-term memory is stored. It's where we function every day of our life. Occipital lobe, coming back at the very back. Parietal lobe is the, occipital lobe is the little red piece there. I don't have a pointer on this Zoom, but the red is the occipital. That's a vision, responsible for our vision. Interestingly enough, our vision is at the back of our brain and our eyes are at the front. I just love the brain. It's just so exciting and so interesting. The parietal lobe is the white area there that you see. And then the temporal lobe is right on the inside of our ears. So it's our hearing. That's what that is. The cerebral cortex is the gray matter. It coats the surface of the brain. It's the vital layer of tissue. It's thickness of about 2 to 3 dimes. So it's very thin. It's about this thick. Comes from the Latin word bark. So it is the bark that covers the inside matter in our brain. Plays a key role in memory, attention, perceptual awareness, thought, language, and consciousness. Most of the actual information processing in the brain takes place in the cerebral cortex, in the outer areas. It all has to come in through our eyes, through our ears, through touching, and then the brain begins to make some kind of information out of that. So the cortex is gray because the nerves in the area lack the insulation that makes most other parts of the brain appear to be white. And the folds in the brain adds to its surface and therefore increase the amount of gray matter. So the gray matter is all folded in, and the quality of information that can be processed depends on how the information is processed through the cerebral cortex, and then through the cortex, and then through the gray matter. There's 4 lobes of the brain. So again, the frontal lobe is the blue. We see it. The parietal lobe is in the white in the middle. The temporal lobe is on the inside of the ears, and the occipital lobe is at the back. What are their functions? The frontal lobe is concerned with reasoning, planning. Again, it's the executive functioning lobe. Planning parts of speech and movement, motor cortex. Emotions, the hippocampus lives in the inside on both sides of the frontal lobe, and problem solving. So higher level thinking skills, everything's happening in the executive functioning lobe. It happens to be the lobe that our kids have the biggest deficit in. Temporal lobe, concerned with perception and recognition of audio stimulus, so hearing. And then the hippocampus is on the inside of the temporal lobe. Sorry, I said the frontal is on the inside of the temporal lobe, right on the inside of our ears. The hippocampus is our memory, our memory areas. So when we have kids that have what we call video dialogue, where they'll listen to Disney films and then they repeat over. Do you know that Beauty and the Beast, and Belle wears a blue dress and the Beast is big and he's very, very big and he's brown? Do you know Beauty and the Beast, and Belle is, well, she's very pretty and the Beast is big and he's brown. Those kids are storing that information, that video dialogue information, in the hippocampus areas. That's where we keep all of our stored information. So we want to start stimulating that information. We can work with that. We can work with that from a behavioral point of view, an ABA point of view, where a child is only able to, in a time period, if they're repeating a video dialogue sequence, they're only able to do it once in the next 5 minutes. And then we're going to increase the time. They can only do it once in the next 10 minutes. They can only say it once in the next 15 minutes. So you increase the time. That's the way to work with speech repetition and our kids that are storing all the information in the hippocampus. The parietal lobe is that white area. It's concerned with perception of stimuli related to touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. So that's the area where if you have a child who is not able to wear, say, lets you know, I can't wear this shirt because the tag is bothering. I can't wear these socks. They're making itchies on my feet. That's the area of the brain that is relating to the touch and the clothing on the body. A lot of our kids don't experience pain in the same way that you or I and a neurotypical person would. Many times our kids will be in pain, what we would consider painful, and they're not able, they don't tell us. They don't experience it in the same way that we do. They're not, I've known children that had sprained or broken ankles and no one knew it until finally the ankle swelled up and they took the child to the hospital and they x-rayed it and they saw that he had a broken ankle, and there was no indication from the child. So that's the lobe, the parietal lobe, that's responsible for that. Occipital lobe is at the very back. We talked about that. It's the vision area. It's located in the back of the brain behind the parietal lobe and the temporal lobe, and it's concerned with the aspects of vision. Vision. So here's the areas we want to really talk about. The Broca's, if you look down, it's that little red area that lives in the frontal lobe. That's responsible for speech production and articulation. So actual speaking. The Wernicke's, if you watch this, draw the line, take the line over there, and it's, I believe, purple. Everybody, I think it's purple. Everybody's, all your pictures of your videos of you are covering it, so I can't see what color it is, and I think it's purple. It's associated with processing of words that we hear spoken or spoken language. That's what we call pragmatics. The idea of thoughts are processed in the Wernicke's. The actual speaking comes from the Broca's area. So the Broca's lives in the frontal lobe. The Wernicke's lives in the temporal lobe, which is right behind, it makes perfect sense. It's right behind the ears. So when we hear the language is coming in, we're making sense of it through the cortical cortex, and the cortical cortex is processing the information, and then we're able to think what that language means. That's what pragmatics is, pragmatics of language, thinking what the ideas are. You hear me tell this story a lot. There's a little boy and he goes to the park with his father, and a dog runs up to them, and the little boy is so excited. He wants to pet that dog, and he reaches down and he starts to pet the dog, and as soon as he pets the dog, he's very excited, very emotional about it. The father looks up at the sky and says, "What a beautiful blue sky." The next time the little boy sees a dog, he runs over to the dog, he starts petting him, and he says, "Blue sky, blue sky." He has married or paired the emotional information coming in through the variables in the environment in his brain with the sound that he heard coming in through the temporal lobe of his father with "It's a beautiful blue sky." So this is how our kids get where we say, "Oh, what is he talking about?" Well, he's talking about something that's very concrete to him, and it means a lot to him. And for some reason, he stored that information in that frontal lobe in that short term, and he's married it with other areas of the brain, so it does mean something to him. It's our job to figure out what he's trying to communicate. We can have children draw pictures and say, "Hey, draw me a picture." If they don't have speech. We also talked before about our communication devices, the language master. I think that was the first session I did on behavior. I talked about picture exchange communication systems for kids who have limited communication skills. Proloquo, which is a program you can download on an iPad. It's fantastic. It has reward systems. It has communication programs. It's just fantastic. Proloquo. We also have the Big Mac that I showed you, which is just the one communication device where you could program it to say yes or no, or colors, or blue or yellow, where you teach the beginning and fundamentals of communication with the Big Mac, it's called. Like a Big Mac hamburger, actually. That's why they call it that. Okay, so let's look at the strategies that work with our kids. Systems, task analysis, we talked about that again the first lecture that I did. Many times we have to break it down. We have to break down tying of shoes. We have to break down fixing a sandwich. We have to break down putting on our clothes, buttoning our shirts, zipping our zippers. And how do we do that? We do visual task analysis. We break the task into parts. Let's say we were doing pants, putting on pants. We pick up the pants from the bed. We put left leg in, right leg in, pull up the pants, zip the zipper, and button the button if we can get that far. Many of our children have fine motor deficits and they're not able to do the buttons. I say just Let them wear pants with elastic. It's okay. That's fine. And if they can't tie their shoe, it's okay too. How about Velcro? There's lots of Velcro Akitas and Nikes and tennis shoes now, and children don't have to tie their shoes. Just move on. That's the least of our worries. Building in ritual for our kids is important. They typically build that in themselves. They like ritual. They like to go the same way to school. They like to go the same way to the grocery store. Be positive, use positive behavior support. We talked a lot about that on the first session, positive behavior support. Utilize self-speaking. So many of our kids will self-talk. They talk to themselves and they answer themselves, and that's okay. It's okay. It's self-speech, which is fine. It's a developmental stage that children go through. A lot of times our children don't go into silent speech, which is when it becomes internal. So all children talk to themselves up until like 2 years of age, because they speak what they're hearing in the environment, through the family, through their brothers, through their sisters, through their siblings, through their friends. At about 2, typically children developmentally, neurotypical children, begin to bring that into interior monologue, and they're no longer outwardly speaking, they're thinking, which again is the pragmatics of speech. A lot of times our kids will continue to self-talk and will talk out loud and talk to themselves. Using music. Let's talk about using music. Okay. So autism movement theory is therapy, an empowering instructional strategy that strengthens both the left and right hemispheres of the brain, interhemispheric integration, by combining patterning, visual movement, calculation, audio receptive processing, receiving audio, rhythm and sequencing for a whole brain cognitive approach that improves the behavioral, emotional, academic, social, and speech and language skills through remapping of the brain. It's a cognitive remapping of the brain. So we're going to look at the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, because the brain is divided between the corpus callosum. It's the thin piece of skin that holds the left hemisphere with the right hemisphere. So we look at the left hemisphere, it's typically analytical, and the right, which is the global piece, verbal, like we talked about. The Broca and the Wernicke's is on the left, lives in the left side of the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. Right is more visual, coming from the occipital lobe at the back. Responds to word meaning is the left side of the brain, responds to tone of voice, audio. Sequential, random, right side of the brain. Processes information linearly, processes information as a whole. Responds to logic and plans ahead, responds to emotion, right side. I'm going left to right, left to right. Recalls people's names, recalls people's faces. Speaks with few gestures, gestures a lot when speaking. As you see, I gesture a lot when I speak. Right side of the brain. Punctual typically is a characteristic of left or logical analytical side of the brain. Not so punctual, right. Prefers formal study design, prefers sound and music while studying. I always have classical music playing while I'm doing everything. I turn it on as soon as I get up in the morning. Music, 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 music. Have music playing in your house, music in your car. Make sure that it is, if you can, music without lyrics. Like again, I said, Mozart, Stravinsky, Ravel, Bach, Beethoven. Tchaikovsky tends to be a little bit da, 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 you know, a lot more, but I would stay with more like Stravinsky. I love Stravinsky. These lot of violins. It's beautiful. Back to the left side of the brain. Prefers bright lights while studying, and prefers staying in one formal study design. And the right side of the brain, it prefers frequent mobility, so moving around. I tend to be more of a right brain person. You can see where you feel, where you fit. We, of course, we use both sides of the brain, but we tend to be one or the other. Just like we tend to be either visual learners or audio learners. We either, if you go to a party and you meet somebody and you have a nice conversation with them and they introduce themselves as, oh, my name is John. Oh, it was so nice to meet you, John. And then you walk away and you go, what was that guy's name? If we don't wear the name tags. That's why I always have name tags in all my workshops, so that I'm a visual learner. I have to relate the visual. And our kids are visual learners too, but they tend to be more audio. So a lot of times, if you're having, just FYI, if you're having a problem with phonetics and teaching reading, get the book on tape. Now, I don't know if we can get what other kind of languages we can get on CDs, books on CD, but I do know that One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish CD, I've taught many, many children who school districts have said they'll never learn to read because they're audio learners and they must have an audio and a visual processing going on at the same time. One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. Why? Because Dr. Seuss was brilliant in that he used all the high frequency words over and over and over again in the English language. Also, other Dr. Seuss books are great, but that's the one that is the very, very best for teaching reading. Also, Thomas the Train. There are CDs of Thomas the Train, which are fantastic. That's for a little above, a little higher level. But if you're wanting your child to read and you're having difficulty, it may be because the letters are only being presented to him in a visual without the audio. We need like visual alphabet cards where the card says, what is the letter? A. What is the sound? A. What is the object? Apple. What is the letter? B. What is the sound? B. What is the object? Bus. You must teach language that way, reading that way to our kids who are struggling with what we call perception of symbol, making some kind of significance out of a symbol. That's why they can't read. They can't make significance out of a symbol. We have to give them a sound that goes with that symbol. Then we can begin to put the sounds together and we can teach words. One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, the best. And get it with a CD, so audio, where there's someone reading it and it gives a prompt to turn the page. So you're teaching the fundamentals of reading, holding the book, reading from left to right, top to bottom, which is English in the English way, top to bottom, left to right, turn the page. Top to bottom, left to right, turn the page. And there's a page prompt. Goes ding, turn the page. So the left and right hemispheres are not talking to each other. So what's the issue? The connective tissue, the corpus callosum, serves as the conduit or the bridge between the left and right hemisphere. We talked about that. Studies indicate that the bridge can be strengthened in order to transmit information between the left and right hemisphere. That's the primary goal of what I developed as autism movement therapy. Let's talk a little bit about the corpus callosum. Many of you have heard me talk about Einstein. And when Einstein died, his brain was put in a jar and it lived at the bottom of Princeton University. And his foundation said that they didn't want anyone to dissect it or mess with it or look at it for 25 years. 25 years. 25 years was up, and I believe it's 2013, and there's a wonderful article on Einstein's brain. Immediately they pulled his brain out. They wanted to know why was his brain so different? What made him a genius? And they found that the corpus callosum, which is the thin membrane, look here, I'm making sure I'm in the camera view, that's about 1/4 of an inch for neurotypical individuals, that his was 4 inches. 4 inches. So if we look at the corpus callosum as the highway for the information to be processed through the cortex where the information comes in, the 4 lobes of the brain are processing that information. If it's sound, it goes to the temporal lobe. If it's vision, it goes back to the occipital lobe. If it's memory, it goes to, we want to memorize, it goes to the hippocampus. But the corpus callosum is the highway that connects the right hemisphere with the left hemisphere. And he had his corpus callosum with 4 inches, ours a quarter, his 4 inches. He had more, what I say, 8-lane highway for information to go from the right to the left, continually being stimulated. So I think it was very tough to be Einstein. I think he had lots of information coming in. He was continually processing it all. And he had such a large corpus callosum that he probably couldn't turn it off, which happens with a lot of our children as well. They're not able to turn it off. They're not able to turn it off. We have a lot of kids who are very, very, very bright. We have a lot of kids that are very high functioning, and we get confused. We think they're not, and they are. It's because something's not right in the Broca's or the Wernicke's on the left side of the hemisphere of the brain, and not allowing them to communicate to us what their thoughts and their processes and their pragmatic thinking is. We can stimulate that. We can give it a big try with movement and music together. We want children to move together and hear the music. So they're using the gross motor, they're moving to patterns and sequencing, not just anything, not at willy-nilly, not at random. You want to give them patterns and sequencings to reproduce. You want to work with imitation. Imitation is the core key in movement and music. That's how we learn to dance. That's how we learn to do everything, through imitation. We imitate our mothers and our fathers and the people closest to us, imitation. So how does the AMT work? It's an instructional technique that strengthens, again, both the left and right hemisphere of the brain by combining patterns. The brain loves patterns. That's why you show the brain a little, one pattern, an 8-count pattern, a couple of times, and bingo, your brain has it. Like, I don't have to think about that anymore. It's kind of like if you move to a, you move to a new house and you need to go to the grocery store. You get in your car and you go, well, wait a minute, I think I have to go right here, and then I have to go straight here, and then I go left here, and that's where the grocery store is. But after a while, after you've done that 2 or 3 times, do you have to go, I go right here, I go straight here, I go left? No. You get in the car and you can be thinking about all kinds of other things while you're driving to the grocery store because your brain already remembered the pattern. Another example I give is you have a home, and in the back is another house where you rent out for someone. But that person has to use your laundry room, which is at the back of your house. And you have a yard and it has grass. But as soon as that person begins to travel back and forth between your laundry room and their house at the back of your house, there's no longer grass there. It becomes a neuropathway. And that's how we have to think about pathways for our kids in the brain. There are neuropathways, and we're making new neuropathways for them. There's a great book, it's called The Brain That Changes Itself. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for many years. The author is Norman Doidge, D-O-I-D-G-E. The Brain That Changes Itself. It's all about neuroplasticity and the ability for the brain to change. So if we give our children the information in the environment, we give them music, we give them patterns, we give them sequencing, and we ask them to reproduce it or imitate what we're doing, we can neurologically change the patterns or the neuropathways in the brain. It's a natural strategies for students with limited speech and language because they don't have to talk while they're dancing and moving, and because they're able to express themselves through the music and the movement, at the same time experience the thrill of actually moving their bodies through space. All children love to move. They love to move. It's just a part of being human. Temple Grandin, as you know, is a friend of mine, and she endorsed my program early on in 2009, I believe. Programs like Joanne's Autism Movement Therapy offer opportunities for our kids to develop the necessary and fundamental skills that benefit all our kids. And she says, art saved my life. This is my classroom here in Los Angeles. It's my dance studio. It's not at my home. It's a dance studio where I offer the certification workshops and the class, weekly class on Saturdays. And those are children in the class and individuals in the class. This is Temple Grandin, for those of you that don't know Temple. She's in the red shirt with a tie. That's she and I at Colorado State University, at her classroom where she teaches animal husbandry. She is an animal sciences PhD. That's her thing. She teaches at Colorado State, and we went up there, and she's in my documentary, Generation A, Portraits of Autism in the Arts, and she's become a good friend of mine. She's showing me there in those pictures her architectural renderings for how she changed how cattle go to slaughter. They used to go straight, and she said the cows knew that they were going to their death, and that's why they didn't want to go, and it was a terrible thing. And so she redesigned the way cattle go to slaughter in a circular, they go in a circular corral. And it's used all over the world. It's used in India as well. Did you know that rapid movement activates the amygdala, or the brain's emotion center? So rapid movement, moving fast and stopping, moving fast and stopping. Soccer is a great way to activate the amygdala as well. Up and down, forward and sudden halt, and side to side movements help to organize the brain. Again, we go back to the children who rock. Why are they rocking? Why are they rocking? They're organizing their brain. They are trying to make some sense out of the variables in their environment. And it's meaningful for them. Don't stop them from rocking. What you want to do is replace it with more meaningful behavior. So we're going to take them up a level. So we don't have to leave them here rocking because they can't communicate. We're going to teach them how to communicate through movement and music and imitation and one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, and all the information that we can give to them. It's very good to stimulate the areas of the brain and then have the child, after the stimulation, sit down and attend to some kind of a task, either math or language arts or something that you're trying to teach. Temple Grandin, again, the pictures of Temple, well-known author, professor at Colorado State University and autism advocate, tells us that repetitive rocking motion that requires a person to continually find and refine their balance stimulates areas of the brain where learning receptors are located. So don't stop your child from rocking. It's a very meaningful. I see you. Are you there with your child, Dr. Jahan? Some of you are in your clinic setting, I think. Yeah. Okay. Those are pictures, as you can see, those are pictures of children in the class, my class here in California. That's the circle of, for those of you that have done the Autism Movement Therapy Level 2. I also have a Level 1 online, which is what Saki was telling you about. I'm offering a $100 discount for you guys, because all you have to do is use the code, and it's only $299. It's a very, very good program. It's Autism Movement Therapy Level 1. It will give you a certificate. It will give you a certificate at the end of the course. You have 30 days to take it, and it has 4 short quizzes within the units, the 4 units that I wrote. So back to patterns and sequencing, starting and stopping and repetition. That is the key. Patterns and sequencing, starting and stopping and repeating. That's the key to using a movement and music program. So if you're in a movement program, or your child's in a program, and they're just allowing them to move to the music any way they'd like, you're not really getting the full benefit. Sorry. You're not getting the full benefit. You want a structured dance class. You want a structured dance class. You want them to have a beginning and an end to sequence it. You want to show discreteness. Discreteness. Things stop and start. Things stop and start. Things stop and start in our world. And we have to teach that to our children, that things start and they stop, because many of our kids are moving. The variables in the environment are very interesting to them, the light and the sound and this paper over here, and they don't stop. We have to teach discrete, being discrete, a beginning and an end. These are more pictures of the children. Okay, things about music. Music and dance calms us and helps us to regulate our moods. Dance and music has an enormous effect on our thinking and how we process information. So I want you to begin to play music in your home, play music in your car. Get your teachers in the classrooms, in your special ed classrooms, to be playing music all the time. All the time. You can't do it too much. We use all our senses when we dance. We use our body, we use our ears, we use our eyes. And most important of all, we use our whole brain. Now remember, we're not just talking about just dancing, because a lot of our kids, if you turn on music, they'll just dance. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about structured movement and music dance program or dance class. Facts about movement and music. It allows for increased inclusion opportunities. A lot of times our kids, when they're not familiar with their movement and their bodies, when we go to parties and celebrations, they won't join in. They'll be in the corner. They're not familiar with that. It's another reason why we want to present movement and music to them, so that they can be in more inclusive environments with their friends, their peers, their family, your families, your extended families. It's a platform to teach social studies. Use different music. You can use music from Africa, music from India, music from Bali, music from Ireland. Use different kinds of music for the dance program. It gives cultural diversity through the music and the dance. The first music therapy program in the US was started at Michigan State University in 1944. So that's how long music therapy has been around, a long time. Movement and music are the universal language. We all know that. You don't need to speak to move. Music and movement, universal language. Dance and music add an element of beauty to our lives. We don't need to verbally communicate when we dance. And dancing to music engages both the left and right hemispheres of the brain. I'm going to say it again. Dancing to music engages both the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And remember, Einstein, corpus callosum, 4 inches, ours, 1/4 of an inch is 4 inches. All the information coming in through the eyes, through the ears, making some kind of sense of it, is traveling across the corpus callosum from right hemisphere to left hemisphere, making some kind of sense in the frontal lobe of those variables. When is a good time to do AMT? I have a DVD, as you know. It's called Autoaerobics, designed for doing it every day. It only is 11 to 15 minutes of each one of the levels. There's 3 levels, and there's a hip hop level at the end. I did a little experiment. I did a little research. I was teaching at an RDI school, Stephen Gutstein School. And I said, I'd like to do a research study on the DVD. So I had 12 weeks of having the students come in different groups. We found that after 12 weeks, 2 or 3 sessions, the students were more compliant. They were doing the DVD, the Autoaerobics DVD with me, just like a workout DVD. They were more compliant when asked to complete a task or interact with typical general education peers. They interacted more frequently. They developed an increased overall self-determination awareness. You know, I always talk about self-determination. Independence and self-determination. Our kids have to do it for themselves. We have to stop prompting them and let them be more independent. Their self-esteem and their skills progressed, and they were capable of performing more independently overall. Our biggest discovery was that children were challenged speech and language communication skills, made a substantial progress with the pragmatics of language and actual speech articulation. I've always said that if I could get a study, I would do an MRI study, and I would measure speech and language. I would take children who are limited communicators, give them 8 weeks of autism movement therapy 3 times a week, and then again measure the speech and language. You would see that the language will start to kick in. I saw it in my classroom. I know it to be true. So with time, we say even a bear can learn to dance. It's a Yiddish proverb. Because a lot of people say, a lot of parents will say, oh, I can't dance, or I'm not good at that, or teachers will say, I can't dance, and I don't teach a dance program because of that. And everybody can move. Just put the music on and give the students steps to do. Remember, you're going to use the left side of your brain to remember the patterns and the sequencing, the right side of the brain to visually process the movement and hear the music. And you use the bridge, the corpus callosum, Einstein, the 4 inches, our quarter of an inch, between the left and right hemispheres to execute and perform the dance sequences. And it's fun, and they love it. It's evidence-based. As for therapeutic goals, music therapy has the largest body of evidence to support its efficacy for students in special education, especially those with autism. Scientists hypothesize that music engages the mirror neuron system in the human brain, which supports development in sensory motor integration, speech and social skills. Music therapy can be individualized to accomplish goals in fine motor skills. Again, fine motor are the little muscles in our hands, and our kids have a hard time with that. It's why we have the writing utensils. Remember, we talked about didn't I talk about with us the grips, the pencil grips, the different, the large pencils, big pencils, things that allow them to be able to write better, if you will. Music therapy can be individualized to accomplish goals in fine motor skills, speech, social skills, and emotional processing, as well as the memory, which is the hippocampus. These are just testimonies. You all know Stephen Shore. He's my friend. He says, realizing that the arts of movement and music are important to all, Joanne elevates that vital component of intervention to new levels. People on autism spectrum, as well as everyone else, needs to move.
Joanne, Stephen is in fact here with us.
He's with us today?
I'll just unmute him right now.
Oh,
hi, Joanne, I'm here.
Hi, honey. How are you?
Good, how are you? It's great to see you.
Good to see you too. Stephen and I are brainstorming about offering a session together. So
yes.
We have to figure out what you want most, what you'd like to hear most from us, right, Stephen?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so afterwards when we do the Q&A, when we have enough time, I'll make sure we have enough time. It's almost 9. I want to hurry and finish so I can take a lot of questions. Then let us know what you would be interested in for us, okay?
Yeah, I circulated a feedback form for everyone. So if they could to fill that out, that'd be great.
Okay, good. All right, I think I'm almost finished. I can't remember how long this PowerPoint is. Cultures in relating to autism within and between families. You never really get over, you just learn how to deal with it. That's actually a friend of mine. She's written many books on autism, and she has a son who's 28 now, I believe, with autism. But we talk about the grief cycle, beginning. In the beginning, sad, and then moving into anger, and then confusion, and then getting help and support and services. Got to reach out, get the help that you need, but make sure that you're also including the arts. Look, all the arts are fantastic. Painting, clay, music, movement, drumming. Remember when Stephen and I traveled with Karen Howard, who's a music therapist, and Jane Richardson, who's an art therapist, and Allie Golding, who also does what I do with very young children. She's in London. And we did a 5-day workshop in Delhi, and then we went to Bangladesh. And people so loved the art piece because the art piece is so important for our kids. It allows, for one thing, the children to show us who they are. If they're non-communicators and they're limited communicators or limited verbal communicators, a lot of times we don't really know who they are when they're little guys. But through the arts, they can show us through their paintings, through their movement, through their music. We get to know who they are. They can express themselves. So make sure you're not pushing the arts aside. Make sure you're using, you're making a well-rounded program for your children with ABA or floor time, some kind of a behavioral program as well. as well as the movement and music and the speech and language and the social skills program. It's all very, very important. So working with individuals who are challenged and on the autism spectrum. We want to build safety skills in. We have to be very, very, very aware of safety, crossing streets, running out of buildings. We need to build and teach that skill. We need to develop trust between adults and our children. We need music and repetition. We need maintaining predictable schedules. We talked about schedules. My first session lecture 2 weeks ago, we talked about how important it was to have a visual schedule, an agenda for the day. Connecting and caring. Well, I can't say enough about connecting and caring with our children. Find the way to connect with our children. Find that way. If it's music, if it's yoga, if it's martial arts, if it's painting, if it's clay, if it's beading, whatever it is, find a way to connect. Connect with your child and the children that you are working with. Maintain predictable schedules. Can't say it enough. Have to know what's coming next, everyone. Have to know. We want to know what's coming next. And a lot of times in our classrooms, we will hear teachers or we will hear parents say, when a child, what are we going to do now? We'll let you know. Well, you wouldn't want to get on an airplane and not know where it's going to land. So they really need to know what's happening next, what's coming next. So best practices, teaching pre-employment. This is a book that I wrote, co-authored with Susan Osborne, Teaching Pre-Employment Skills to Jobs, 14 to 17-year-olds. This book you can buy on my website. It's something you might be interested in, Stephen and I talking about pre-employment skills. Here's pictures of Temple and me. They're on the left. There's Stephen and Temple and myself. That was something called Temple Grandson and Friends. We did a big kickoff for Autism Works Now in May of 2015. All the kids danced and performed from Autism Movement Therapy. It was a big event. It was fantastic. It was beautiful. This is my Glorious Pies program, and it's part of the Autism Works Now. Those are the candidates that are in Autism Works Now, and we sell desserts and coffee. Desserts and coffee. We have Charlie there on the left. You see him with headphones. Many of our kids wear headphones because there's too much sound in the environment coming in. It's okay. Let them wear headphones. Make it easy. Charlie works with us. We love to have Charlie working with us. There we are with our van. We have a van. We travel with the van, and it's a catering company. And everybody there's on payroll. They all get a paycheck. So they all work part-time. Right now we're not working, of course, because of COVID-19, but we'll get back to it soon. And they love that paycheck, and they love working. We want to open a storefront. That's our next. We want to have a coffee house. That's our next endeavor. So thank you for attending. This is the training venue where the AMT Level 1 certification online workshop is. Online certification. I also have a transitioning to the workplace, a seat at the table. It's Temple Grandson and I. And down there is the IAC discount with an exclamation point, and I left it off the last 2 times, and I'm sorry. I just realized that it has to have the exclamation point, and that's a $100 discount on the AMT Level 1 certification. There's also another 2-hour program, and there's 2 CEUs credits given out for psychology, social work, occupational therapists, marriage and family therapists, nutrition, dietetics, school psychology, and teachers. So you can go to that website. It's called PDR Resources. It's not PDF, it's PDR. I made a mistake. PDRresources.org, and it's Autism Movement Therapy. It's just a 2-hour course, but it gives you 2 CEUs, continuing education units. And everyone who attended the IAC series is going to receive a free Autism Asperger's Digest digital copy. So make sure that Saki has your email address so that you can get the link. This is the magazine, Autism Asperger's Digest. You see our friend Charlie there is on the cover. I write for this magazine. It's a wonderful magazine. And I think it's valuable information that you'll really benefit from. So the first edition is going to be free for you guys. There's a May edition that's coming out soon, so you'll get the link to the May edition. And then if you want, you can subscribe. It's not very much. So we'll let you know more about subscription and all that. Okay? Okay, any questions?
Yes. So Joanne, the first question is, in what order people take your programs if they're interested in taking all your programs? Is there a specific order that you suggest they should?
I would suggest taking the online course, AMT Level 1 certification, do that online. And then as soon as I can travel again, and we can all travel again, then I'll be coming back and we'll do the certification workshop again. That's a 2-day, 10-hour certification. That would be the order I would suggest. AMT. The other course is only 2 hours. It's very beneficial. You get continuing education units. The DVD you can use with your children. You can use with any of your clients that you're working in a office setting with, or a school setting. It's used across the country in schools. A lot of teachers use it to warm up the children, get them moving in the beginning of the day, and the special education classes. There's also Generation A, Portraits of Autism in the Arts, and I talked about that. Temple Grandin and Stephen Shore are our main through line individuals in Generation A, Portraits of Autism in the Arts, and we study 5 individuals who are very, very successful in the arts area with autism. Yep.
Aisha asked if there's any specific age to do AMT with the person who has autism.
No, I think you can start, I would say there is a specific age. They have to imitate. So imitation pretty much kicks in around 4 and 5 years of age. So 4 or 5 years old. Prior to that, I'm not so sure you can get the attention of the child on a TV monitor.
Deepa Banerjee asked if we have a full day program, what time of the day AMT has a better effect, if at all?
In the morning. In the morning, absolutely in the morning. Do it at the first top of the day when you come in. Use the DVD, the Autoaerobics DVD, and start with level 1. It's only 11 minutes. Everything's color coded. Everything in Autoaerobics is color coded. The first level is pink and red. I wear a red cap, and the gal that dances with me and does the instruction for imitation, we wear pink and a red cap. The second level is yellow, and the third level is brown, I believe. So it's all color coded, and all the steps and the sequencings are the same, but the tempo picks up and it becomes more difficult through the levels. But start with level 1. Start with level 1, right at the top of the day.
Is Autoaerobics available online, Joanne?
Yeah, iTunes. iTunes.
I'll share.
You can get it online on iTunes.
Sudha asked that her daughter is 5.5 years old, non-verbal. Is there any music routine that you suggest that will help her to start talking or maybe start verbalizing a little? Yeah, I think you should get the Autoaerobics DVD and start working with her in the home setting with it. Yeah, absolutely. Either get it on iTunes or get the DVD. You can get the DVD on my website, autismmovementtherapy.org, on the store. Click on the store tab. Siddharth Gupta, parent, also asks a question. He says, our son is self-talking and he keeps revolving on the bed, jumping on sofas. When interrupted, he reacts. How do you handle the situation? And also sometimes due to mood swings, he's suddenly coming and getting aggressive without any reason. His speech is nearly normal. He can express himself, but still all the above behaviors are creating issues both at school and home.
Okay, how old is he? Can somebody tell me how old he is?
He's 7.5.
7.5, okay. All right, so 7.5 and trying to run his world. Okay, well, you probably need some very intensive, I love ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. If you can't have Applied Behavior Analysis, Stephen, who is it that you like so much, the other behavior that you love?
Oh, I was talking about the Miller method.
The Miller method, right.
Right.
Do you think they have the Miller method in India?
No, but it could be implemented through video conferencing pretty easily because he does that already.
Okay, that would be very good. Okay, so I use ABA. I have a advanced graduate certificate in ABA. I love ABA, but there are other forms of behavioral. We have floor time and we have the Miller method. I can't think of anything else really besides those three. But you need to get behavioral intervention and somebody that knows what they're doing, because the aggression is probably not going to go away until you start giving if-then contingencies and start rewarding the behavior you're looking for. And you're going to have help with that. Now, the first session I did was a behavioral session. And you can go back and watch that. There's a lot of tips on it, but you really need a therapist coming into your home. You need to be working with somebody.
The Miller method spelled M-I-L-L-E-R, Miller method.
Miller method, M-I-L-L-E-R method. Mm-hmm.
That's
out
right.
of New York. Correct, Stephen? Out of New York, right?
It's actually out of Boston, and
Boston.
you can find it at millermethod.org.
Okay. Millermethod.org. And his son now runs the clinic, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. That would be a good one for you to do a lecture on, Stephen, the Miller method.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do one.
Yeah, Stephen used the Miller method as a child, didn't you, Stephen?
No, actually, it didn't exist then. It would have been good if it
Oh, I
did
thought
exist.
you did. Okay.
No, I just have spent a lot of time with it, and
Okay. I know you.
spending a lot of time at the clinic.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. Is that snow that we're seeing in your background? Is it snowing?
No, but it was yesterday, so I figured it would be good to put it up.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Stephen's in Boston, right? You're in Boston right now, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in Boston.
Okay. All right. More questions. What do we have?
So I have two last questions for you, Joanne. One, Deepa asked, can you describe what a typical AMT schedule is like, and how time consuming is it?
Well, the AMT class itself is 45-minute class. It's a real dance class. But again, the DVD is only 11 minutes for each section, 11 to 13, 14, 15 minutes for each section, 1, 2, and 3. Developing, the levels are in the beginning, developing, and advanced. I believe that's what the levels are. That only requires 11 or 12 minutes, but a full autism movement therapy class is 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Shreya and Aisha have sort of similar questions. Shreya asked, how can we modify the therapy for children below 5 years? And Aisha asks, sorry, it's not Aisha who asked that. It's Baishali who asks, will starting AMT at any age give the same benefits, or should we start early?
Well, I always say start early with everything. I mean, as early as you can, all the interventions, all the art interventions right away, the music, the movement, the yoga, everything as soon as you can. You can put the little ones into a dance class. Now, Allie Golding has Movement Works. She's out of London. We need to bring Allie to Kolkata too, Stephen.
Yes, that's right.
She has a program designed for 3, 4, 5-year-olds. So it's for the little tiny ones, and it's fantastic. It's a very good program. She uses my program and her program, and she teaches in the London school system. So maybe we can have Allie do a Movement Works lecture.
Yeah,
I think that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah. Good.
think that brings us to the end of all the questions, Joanne. If you could take it back to the first slide so that all the participants can have your email ID. I'll also circulate just in case if they have any further questions, they can reach out to Joanne.
Sure, Joanne at autismmovementtherapy.org. JOANNE at autismmovementtherapy.org. And of course, the website are autismmovementtherapy.org, autismworksnow.org, and gloriouspies.org, which is the catering company. Okay. Are there any other questions, or are there any suggestions for what you would like to, sessions you would like to see? You'd like to see Stephen and I do? Maybe Stephen could do the Miller method. Maybe we can get Allie to do another lecture. Allie Golding would be Movement Works. If she could do a lecture, that'd be good. I think you'd like that for the little ones.
Yeah,
what would you like to see Stephen and I do if we did a collaborative session? We do a good session on pre-employment skills to jobs training, and this is for older individuals. You know, it's for junior high to high school kids.
Aisha says, thank you so much, Joanne. Please have more sessions.
Oh, that's great. Well, look, I'm happy to do them, and Stephen is happy to do them as well. We always love coming and visiting everybody in India. And so as soon as we can travel again, we'll be back, and we'll do some more AMT and art therapy sessions, and we'll get the ball rolling. For now, I know it's tough for a lot of you. You're inside and the kids are not at school. So hopefully I've given you some pointers and some tools that, that will be helpful for you while you're in the home setting with the children and keeping them active. But don't forget, make sure you do that daily agenda. It's very important. What are we going to do first? First, we're going to eat breakfast, then we're going to brush our teeth, then we're going to do math, or I would do language arts first, then we're going to do language arts, then we're going to take a little break, then we're going to walk around the block, then we're going to come back. Remember, it's got to do that daily schedule. It's very important for these children. They want to know what comes next, and remember, erase it when you've done it. When you finish it, erase it, complete it, complete it, complete it. Sense of completion is very, very good. We all want that sense of completion, and build in your reinforcers. Build in your rewards. Reward having a snack. Reward having some gummy bears. Reward playing with Lego. Reward using the iPad. Build in your rewards like we talked about for the first session. Very important. You've got to build in the reinforcements, everybody. Children need to be reinforced constantly, all the time, when they're giving us the behavior that we're looking for. Okay, not when they're tantruming and throwing themselves on the bed. But as soon as they're not, we say, I love the way you're not throwing yourself on the bed. Why don't you come over here and have a half of a cookie or a cookie and play with your Legos? Okay, that's differentiated reinforcement of other behavior, or a DRO. All right, is there anything else, or are we good?
That's pretty much it, Joanne. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Joanne's